Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give it another few minutes while we wait for everyone to join. Oh, I was chatting on mute for a minute there. So sorry. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're calling in from. It's just noon. I think we'll get started. My name is Stephanie Kushner. I'm part of the business development team here at TPGI. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today for our webinar, What's New in ARC with Charlie Pike. I have a few housekeeping items that I want to go over before we get started, just so that everyone knows this session is being recorded, and we will email the recording to everyone after the event. We do have captions available, so feel free to use them as needed. And we will leave time at the end of the webinar for Charlie to answer some questions. If you could please put your questions in the Q&A box. They will definitely be noticed immediately at that time. If you put them in the chat, I'll try to monitor to the chat, but can't guarantee that everything gets seen in the chat. So please use the live Q&A box and we will answer questions at the end of the webinar. Lastly, I just want to mention if anyone needs any additional accessibility support or training or interested in learning about our accessibility testing tools, ARC included, of course, I will send out an email with a link to schedule a time to speak with one of our experts after the webinar. And with that, Charlie, feel free to introduce yourself and get started.
Thanks very much, Stephanie. So my name is Charlie Pike. I'm the Director of Platform Success here at TPGI. And I've been with TPGI, well, really since the very beginning. So well over 20 years now, about 25 years almost. And been in accessibility for around the same length of time. And my role is really to be the liaison between customers and our ARC platform being the technology around which we deliver our services, but also the technology that we offer to our customers to manage, monitor, etc., their accessibility. So today, I will be talking about what's new in ARC. We have a brand new version of the platform which we released this year and which we've been building upon ever since, with some exciting new features, but also a fantastic new UI which gets you to information much more quickly, and effectively organizes your whole accessibility efforts in one place. So as Stephanie says, I will be taking questions at the end, but you can pop your questions at any stage into our Q&A box, and we'll read through them when we get to the end and address as many as I can. So just looking at the slides here, most of what I'm going to do today is to actually walk you through the new version of the platform. But I also want to just sort of introduce the topic. So using our platform, we divide things up, your accessibility efforts, into three topics, if you like: discover, solve, and manage. Okay, discover being finding out your discovery phase, finding out what your accessibility issues are, what's the scope of your accessibility program, what's affected by accessibility, and the impact of accessibility on your business. Whereas solve, obviously the next step is starting to address those accessibility issues. And we would always stress that you've got to really get your arms around it first before you start solving things properly. And then beyond solve, it's a point of getting to a management phase where you're really in charge of your accessibility. You have the data, so you know where you stand. You're monitoring things based on baselines that you understand, baselines of your levels of accessibility across the board. You have your full scope, and you're getting the right tools in the right hands along the way to make sure everybody's doing their part of the accessibility. Okay, so you can think of them in terms of progress. Of course, discover, solve, manage might be things that you're doing all at once. But there's also a natural progression there through them. So I'll give you an overview of accessibility testing in general as we see it, and then take you through those phases and how they evolve in the ARC platform. So those of you who've been on one of my webinars before might recognize this graphic. It's what I call the analysis onion, and it's breaking accessibility testing down like the layers of an onion. So a lot of organizations use some or all or just even one of these layers, one of these methods of testing. But in reality, to really understand accessibility, you need to, and to have a complete, exhaustive testing process, you need to be doing all of these at some stage. And the right people, if the right people are doing them at the right phases, then the effort is minimal. Okay, and this can really disappear into your organization. But in terms of the layers of an onion, so on the outside, we have the outer layer is what we call domain scans in the ARC world, and they are broad level scans. Okay, so they are crawls of websites that might be hundreds, thousands of pages large. You're looking for big data, the big picture when you do those scans. You want to find out, for instance, what areas of your sites are better or worse in terms of accessibility. You want to understand what your trend lines are, and we'll be talking about those a bit in a little while when I'm showing you ARC. In other words, where are there spikes or sudden growths in accessibility issues, and what does that tell you about what's happening with your processes? So you see a spike in your accessibility trend line. Was that the introduction of new controls? Was it a new team who haven't been trained yet? What caused it? So that sort of broad picture helps you understand what's going on underneath the surface. But that's automated testing, and as it is broad, it's not going to tell you your levels of compliance. It's not going to tell you whether you are or are not compliant with WCAG, for instance, or Section 508. But it's very, very good indicator of what's going on in your organization as a whole. A little bit more zoomed in are the user flows and inner layer. User flows are really customer journeys. For instance, if you're looking at a hotel website, it might be the booking process in that hotel website, which is key for users using that site. And so you'd zone in on that and you'd look at that more closely than you would, for instance, at domain scans. User flows can also be processes, right? You're on the website, you select a room, you select number of people, etc. You go through all the various steps as a user would, and you can actually record those in ARC using Selenium, and then have ARC play through those and test as it goes in an automated way. So that's interactive automated testing for user flows. So that's another part, a more zoomed in view of your accessibility, focused on very particular things. Near the center there, the main layer, if you like, of our onion are the manual expert audits. Now, this is obviously something that TPG have been doing for a long, long time. It's our typical task. We have large teams doing this all the time. It's really where our major expertise is. Those obviously you can't do all of the time everywhere. They're very work intensive. You test a selection of screens, not all of your screens in an application. just because of the time that it takes, but that's exhaustive. Okay, that is looking at, for example, all of the WCAG criteria, and it'll give you a picture of your compliance. And I will talk a little bit later on about how you can use these other automated scans to help you choose, for instance, what you're going to actually manually audit, because again, you can't do that all the time. So you can use these different pieces of testing with people with different levels of expertise, with your major expertise being your manual audits, but you can use them in harmony, if you like, to make sure that you're spending the time as efficiently as possible. And then finally, the core of the onion here are really the user-focused aspects. So the assistive technology testing, which you may also do as part of your expert audits, user feedback, getting feedback on your site from users, and we have a capability around that in ARC, and user research, which is the ultimate barometer of the usability of your application. So, I mean, obviously, the gold standard in terms of accessibility is always to test with users. Then you know for sure whether something is efficient as well as compliant in terms of users' experience. So all of these parts of the testing, they're part really of the what we would call the discover phase, are available to do in ARC with various tools, and I'll talk about them. Okay, so looking at that discover phase, as I said, discovery is all about doing your analysis, and you need to do your analysis in different ways to maximize the data that you get back. That outer layer, as I said, is domain monitoring. Here we're looking at a screenshot of the dashboard, which I will show you in the demonstration, breaking down, and this is scanning of both websites and web applications, and breaking things down in terms of the top issues, right? The issues that are occurring most across the board, and also the levels of severity and so on. And this is something that's new to ARC. If you're familiar with ARC already, but haven't used this new version of our interface, we get into this data much more quickly. We're pulling it all together in one page, whereas previously we broke it down into a lot of different graphics and views. Okay, so this really pulls it together. And so it allows you to compare, search through this data, and then understand where you want to look deeper and do deeper level scans. And that's where things like user flow monitoring come in. Okay, user flow, again, something like the booking flow in a hotel website, or the shopping cart flow in an e-commerce website. It's some essential process that you may prioritize simply on the basis that it's key for users, but it might also involve templates or key pages. It might be your header, your footer, isolating different parts or components of your site and making sure they are accessible. So here I've got a screenshot of the setup of a component there. And as I said, you can use scripting. So this can be interactive. ARC can imitate the user, if you like, in a headless browser and run through its tests, open pages, open a dialog box, for instance, and analyze that dialog box, open a data table, analyze just that data table. So it's a great way of focusing in on components. We have one customer, for instance, using user flows to isolate and test third-party widgets, right? So they have a third-party widget library providing things like their dialog boxes and data tables and so on. And they want to just test those because they want to go back with these issues that they found to this third-party vendor and saying, look, you need to fix this, this, and this. Okay, so that's one use for user flows, is actually to isolate things. As I said, it's a more zoomed in and interactive automated testing view. Then, as I mentioned, we have audits. This is a new feature that we have in the platform. We haven't quite rolled it out yet, but we're just kind of building it out at the moment. It is currently available in the current version of ARC that people use, that customers are using right now. But it's essentially an ability to do these audits, these complete audits, to go through all of our various rules. Okay, we have a rule set called the ARC rule set, and that covers all the accessibility requirements around, for example, WCAG or mobile or whatever it is. And the auditor essentially goes through and records a result for each of those criteria. So it's exhaustive, it is time consuming, but we use this tool to make this more efficient and effective. And it comes with full instructions, etc., so that really less experienced users will be able to follow these test processes, record results, and complete audits using this system. The other part to this is, of course, developer testing. You want everybody doing testing at different levels. As I said, once you have everybody doing their bit of the testing, the designers testing their mock-ups, you have specifications with accessibility. Your developers are testing as they go. As code gets committed, it's being tested automatically, etc., QA testing. If you do little bits of testing throughout all of those, obviously the effort is spread, but the cost of accessibility goes up 3, 4, and more times when you leave it to production and then start to resolve issues. Okay, you want it, the more you can capture, the further upstream in your development, the less it's going to cost you and the less effort overall it's going to be to do, and that includes the testing. So developer testing, we have tools in there. For instance, we have a tool for Playwright. We have what we call our SDK for integrating into different automated systems. We also have a complete API in ARC that would allow you to do a complete integration for both your reporting and for your testing systems. So this means that you can do that testing in your pipeline. We also have the ARC Toolkit, which I'll show you today. That's a complementary product, but it's free browser extension. Allows you to do all of that testing, even in the deepest environments where you might, for instance, have not committed code yet. So that's an essential part of the piece. And then I mentioned that we also have tools for the assistive technology testing. So that's the core of our onion, where we're really testing what's the user's experience. And we have a tool called JAWS Inspect. And JAWS Inspect essentially gives you transcripts of JAWS speech for easy sharing and for easy testing. So it's essentially JAWS for testers. Takes away the end user features that you don't need if you're a tester, which means it's very easy to get to learn and to run. And it gives you these transcripts, which are easy to then interpret in terms of finding issues and locating, for instance, content issues. It's a great tool for QA teams who don't have much experience of WCAG and so on to do some simple tests like checking the alternate text descriptions of images. Here I've got an example of from an Amazon website, of an image on the Amazon website, and JAWS Inspect is providing a transcript of what the alternate text is for that image. In this case, Amazon device deals link graphic. Okay, so it's really JAWS made simple for testers, and it allows you to really understand the usability of your, so if you've done the accessibility work, particularly handy, but also for finding issues, to understand the usability of your interface, and it'll go past mere, compliance to something that's effective and easy to use. So those are the different parts of discovery, all the tools that you have available to do your discovery and find out where you sit. And obviously we'll be talking about that again as I walk through the application. Now we have a look at how to solve those problems and how ARC helps you with that. So we have a knowledge center, okay? And this knowledge center is available both in its own space, where you can see both our training modules and our knowledge base articles, but also it kind of undergirds the whole platform. So all of the content here is also available in context wherever you find, for example, the accessibility issues, okay, as solutions to those issues. And this content is there when you're doing manual audits also. So it runs all the way through. And what we have is our knowledge base, which is our articles on all aspects of accessibility. You can see here in the screenshot, Android accessibility, Angular accessibility, web content development, etc. That's maintained by a dedicated team who really do that and the rules. That's what they do. Okay, so they're maintaining this content, improving it all the time. There are always new use cases. There are always refined patterns and so on to implement. They look after that, and we have constant releases then into our various tools of that content. So that is really the one-stop shop for all the information you need on how to do accessibility, even how to test for accessibility. There are test procedures in there too. And then we have Tutor, which is really the training arm of our knowledge center. And that is about embedding skills long term. And that's something you really want to be doing at an early stage when you find issues. When you do an audit or you scan something and you find results, giving it to the team. But before they really start to remediate, they should really do some training. Okay, embed the skills. You don't want them painting by numbers. In other words, just following bugs and fixing bugs without really understanding the bigger picture, what they're doing it for, and what problems they're trying to solve. Okay, if they get some of that insight, they will simply do it better. So we have, again, a training course that covers all aspects of accessibility, beginner to advanced. It has questions, and it can be integrated into a learning management system. It's available through SCORM, so you can keep track of progress, have people complete the course, answer the questions, etc. So it really is a complete and comprehensive accessibility training course. So in terms of solutions, we also have a help desk, which provides direct answers to accessibility questions from our consultants. So in terms of how do you solve the issues that we find in our discovery phase, everything is here in the platform for you. And then finally, as you find your issues, set your priorities, take your actions, and start to solve things, as you roll this out, you need an overall management of your accessibility program. Okay, and this is where this comes in. So we have the reporting capabilities, and I'll take you through some of those as I demo the product to you. But essentially, you can create custom views and share them out to your team, and you can rapidly build out the dashboard. So again, the emphasis is providing the right information to the right people so that they're not overwhelmed, but also they have what they need to know at their fingertips to be able to address their role, whether they're designers, developers, whatever it be. You can build those out quickly, all in one place here in terms of reporting. And we also, as I mentioned, have our API, which allows you to report out to alternate systems. If you need to report out to alternate dashboards, Excel spreadsheets, wherever you're doing your management. We have one customer using the API, for instance, to report accessibility into an overall governance risk report that they send to their executives. Okay, so they just fold certain data that they pull from the ARC dashboards into that report. I think it's in Tableau, and present it, and that runs automatically for them. And they use the API to achieve that. It's quite simple to do. So it's very easy with this ARC data to distribute it across your organization in lots of different ways. And then you have your projects and roles. So you can take all of the stuff that you do in your discovery, your user flow scans, your domain scans, etc., and you can set up custom roles. So here I've got an example in this screenshot for a role of UX team, right? And you can set quite granular rules around what they can view, what they can manage. Okay, and then you can put those into projects. One of the nice new things about our projects over what we had previously is the complete flexibility. You can actually have a data source, and a data source could be a manual audit, could be a scan of a domain, could be a user flow, whatever you want as your data source. You can actually have the same data source in 2 or 3 different projects if you want to. And split them up between different teams, allow teams to view certain sections of those data sources, etc. So you have full flexibility to create your own roles that reflect the roles in your organization, and then set up access. You may divide, for instance, your scope of accessibility into different product groups, product teams. You can give each one a project, a role for that project, and have them come in and just see the data that's relevant to them. And it's all very easy to set up. And then finally, before we go into the demo, I just wanted to show you again another graphic that I use a lot in these webinars as an example of what a sort of integrated, fairly harmonious development life cycle actually looks like. And of course, everybody's own software development life cycle looks different and unique to them. But this is just an idea or an illustration of how it all kind of sits together. So the first phase in any development there we have is monitoring, and that's where the ARC, what we call the client portal, comes in. That's where your accessibility team track progress with your initiatives, prioritize accessibility issues, and set your policies. In other words, say we are going to make sure that keyboard accessibility is addressed this quarter and that there are no keyboard issues from henceforth. This is kind of the way that organizations often break down their accessibility. And there we also have the JAWS Connect service, which allows users to provide feedback directly to the accessibility team inside the ARC dashboard from your website. So you're doing that on a monthly basis. You're monitoring the production site usually, or the production application, to check for accessibility issues, make sure nothing comes up, nothing changes in the wrong way. And then when it comes to the planning phase for the next release, JAWS Inspect can help you prioritize user issues because, as I said, it's focused on the user experience, what affects the users most. So you can use it to prioritize. Then when it comes to coding, for example, on your desktop or before you've committed the code, you can use the ARC Toolkit. The ARC Toolkit is a browser plugin, as I mentioned. It's freely available, so you can distribute it throughout your teams. It uses the same ARC rules as is used in ARC monitoring, but it does it on a page-by-page basis. It doesn't have a crawler. I'll show it to you. It's very easy to use, and your developers can fix things, test, fix again, retest before committing. Okay, and then it goes out into the test phase, and then we have various. Once your code is committed, and you're running through things like automated testing, you can use for example, our Playwright tool to test those commits automatically and accept and reject based on policies. In other words, it doesn't meet our accessibility requirements, so it doesn't go out. And JAWS Inspect can come in really nicely here as a quick QA process that you can run. It's manual testing, but you can run it very, very quickly on each release, checking for top level things like images have alternate text, heading structure is correct, etc. Very, very quick tests that can be done on a regular basis and can be indicators that there might be wider problems if they come up. And then you release, and then again, you're monitoring the production code to make sure that no issues have crept in over time. And you're looking at the big picture there. Now, that's just an example of how this testing might run and how, if you're doing the majority of that at the deep levels, then you're going to have an awful lot left to do further out. So now to jump over and show you the actual platform in action. So here we have the new version of the ARC platform. I'm sure some of you probably have seen this so far already. We've had it out for a few months. And as I said, it's broken down into this discover, solve, and manage. And our discovery goes on in our dashboards here. And on our homepage, you'll notice with this new version, if you're used to existing ARC, we're straight into the data. Okay, there's no waiting around. We pull together the main actions very, very quickly. You go straight into your principal actions, such as adding a project or finding information or adding users, etc., into your account. And you see right away the trend line. One of the biggest things that accessibility managers asked us for when we were building out this new version of ARC is, they said, we want to come in every couple of weeks or every month or whenever we come in to check our data. And first thing we want to see is what's changed. Where are we in the overall status? So if they've created baselines for their scope, and what I mean by that is your scope being all of the stuff that you have to look at in terms of accessibility, all of the stuff that has UI, that's touching your users, and that's within the priority of whatever your accessibility program is. That's your scope. Okay, and you want to set baselines for that scope in the sense that you want to understand over time, what's my steady state? Okay, so normal business carrying on without particularly doing any accessibility efforts, where are we? And we use this WCAG density score, as we call it, to overall measure the levels of accessibility, or your finding density rather. And by establishing the steady state, we can then see the changes. Okay, so there's been a fairly large, almost doubling of accessibility issues here in the latest scan. So that's going to be cause for alarm, probably. What's gone on here? Okay, has somebody introduced something new? Again, is there a new team? Are we not doing our accessibility testing this release? Have we rushed it out? What has happened? You may not, it may not matter very much what the specific accessibility issues are, but more treating those issues as symptoms. Okay, what is happening in our process that's causing this sudden spike? And we have recommended reading here, which is actually based on these findings. Okay, so it's based on the issues that have come up. And you'll see this, I mentioned that our knowledge-based content is kind of undergirding the platform. It appears in context. So here it is in context. You can see some guidance on using a HTML validator for testing. So we're covering all areas. We're covering how to fix accessibility. We're also covering how to test it, which is key. Whenever you fix something, you should really have a test process to make sure that it doesn't return and that you understand it completely. And here it is available to you. And that, as I said, is based upon this data. So we've seen that HTML validation, for instance, is a top issue. And you can also keep track of all your scanning work in here. So you can see what scans you're running and whether they're completed successfully. And so you can see your monitoring activity as it goes on. And then you only really need to dig one level deeper right into your dashboard to really pull together all your data. So of everything we are scanning here in the platform at the moment, this is the overall results. The top issues, organized by the number of instances, but you can obviously sort it in a number of different ways, including the severity of the issues, depending what's important. So this is a density score based upon this data that we're scanning. So in this case, we've got one source, 40 total components. They could be URLs or they could be individual dialog box in the user flow. And we have 3,000 instances of those issues for a total density of 77 here. Okay. And here we can immediately dig into some of these findings and have a look at them. So we've got link has a title. Well, let's go and have a look at errors first. So no link text, for instance. So we can go straight in and see immediately where the component or what components have that specific issue. And we can see pages related to each of these issues. So we can dig down very, very quickly into these. And if we have a look at, let's see, we'll have a look at no link text. We'll get details straight away. So we're one click down from the dashboard and already we get a breakdown of what this no link text issue is. We get related articles. So this covers everything we need to know about no link text, all the various articles. You'll note that these articles are they're comprehensive, but we keep them short and pithy. We keep them down to the clear details, code examples, and so on, so that people can grasp this very, very quickly and they're not intimidated by vast amounts of information. We have guidance that links you to WCAG itself and to the standards, really everything you need to know about no link text. And then we have a breakdown of all the various instances of this no link text. And you can actually get down immediately into the individual code where those issues occur. If, however, you're managing the whole process from here, you can also use the toolkit to get down into the weeds. In other words, the toolkit uses the same ARC rules. So here we are in the Chrome browser, and the ARC toolkit I mentioned is a plugin. It's also available in Firefox, in Edge Chromium. We're working on a version for Safari. all of them use the same rules, so the same set of tests, same criteria. However, in the toolkit, it's much more visual. We don't get into all the detail of WCAG, etc. We just break this down into easily recognizable topics, images, keyboard, etc. that you can filter. And we indicate visually on the page for you where those issues occur. So if you're content authors or developers, this is your tool for doing your testing, right? Checking your templates, checking your code. It makes it very, very simple. It breaks out all the issues for you. You can even do some nice manual checks if you understand something about them. For instance, it will show you the tab order. Here, if you were to tab through this page, this is the order that the tab key would take you, if you like, and you can check if that is actually logical. It's got a lot of those nice visualizations, which means it's a great introduction to accessibility testing as well. Okay, and you can actually break it down. So if you've decided not to address accessibility all in one mouthful, you can look at individual topics. So you could direct your teams and say, hey, just do the keyboard tests, just run those and look at the results of those and address those for now. Okay. And as they fix, test, release, etc., using the toolkit, then you on your dashboard should see this trend line come down. And really, that's the ideal relationship between your monitoring and your sort of day-to-day testing further upstream. You're watching the production site, you're making sure that things improve over time, you're setting directives or test initiatives that say we're going to address this quarter or this year, and just directing your teams then to use the likes of the toolkit to check that as they go before things come out so that it's quick and it's easy to do. Okay, your trend line will go down. So this dashboard, as I mentioned, is fully customizable, so that you can set it up for the reports that you want and break it down in really all the variety of ways that you would want to in this case. We also have, if you recognize our pie charts and visualizations from our current version of ARC, excuse me, we still have our visualizations, and we'll have more coming soon. And they're also available, of course, as data tables. But we also have this filtering capability, okay? And what this allows us to do is really choose any of the criteria you would want to choose from, be it the WCAG standard that you want to use, or the Section 508, or whatever it be. The various projects, the things that you are scanning, in this case, are sample web store and user flows. The topics, such as contrast, custom widgets, etc. And the categories of error, whether they're errors, alerts, which are just warnings, if you like, and the levels of severity, etc., and even the affected groups. So you can break it down in all these different ways. And then if you want to, you can save that particular filter and it becomes a view. Okay, so I just want to see WCAG 2.0. I can change that and all the data updates accordingly. Okay, so now my trend line is looking a lot better, which immediately tells me that a lot of the issues were related, or new issues must have been related to things that were in WCAG 2.2. So you basically get a trend line and report that is related to these criteria that you've set up. The beauty of that is, first of all, it's obviously very easy to build custom reports this way, very, very quick, as you can see. But you've got all the criteria that you need. And then over time, we're going to extend this capability really into sharing this dashboard. So you could build out a dashboard. If you're the accessibility manager, you could build a dashboard for your executives, you could build a dashboard for your designers. You could do this in minutes, distribute it to them, and then when they come in, they see what's relevant to them. Okay, but because I'm an admin here on this, I'm seeing by default, I'm seeing all of the data, all of the things that are being scanned inside of the account. Okay, so that you see here, that's really, when it comes to discovery and looking at your analytics, That's the interface. So we've made it very, very quick to get to that data and very, very easy. We've gone straight from the home page to this dashboard, and then we're one click right down to the details of a specific issue and where it occurs. And that's really all there is to it in terms of the analysis. So we've really made that very efficient and quick. When it comes to the solve phase, as I said, here is our knowledge center. So this takes that knowledge that we showed you that was in context elsewhere. All of this becomes complete articles. If you were to read this, this is a complete course in accessibility that's up to date and that is constantly maintained by our folks. And we actually have a facility inside our own testing tools that allows our team to submit new cases, new patterns to the knowledge base. Okay, so every time we're testing constantly, we're coming across things constantly. And as I said, our teams are always coming up with new and improved methods for addressing complex challenges in accessibility. All of that feeds in through a process into this knowledge base on a continuous basis. So this is the latest and best information. It's solid, and you can use this as your single source of truth for your accessibility efforts. And likewise, Tutor is a training course. And as I mentioned, it's available here. Obviously, you can take all of this. It's available to all your team who are in ARC. But you can also include this in your learning management system. So we have a complete player, HTML player here for running through the training, doing the quizzes, etc. You have accessibility checks, but all of that can be, as I said, integrated into your learning management system, and then you can do the same tracking. You can track who's attended the course, who's completed the course, etc. So together, they represent the embedding of accessibility knowledge in your organization. That's going to be key for that goal of having accessibility disappear inside your organization, just to become something that you do, a basic skill for all of your teams, accessibility. And I always advise that you start doing this. If you've had an audit from us, for instance, start getting testing in place as soon as possible, because you want to make sure that as your teams fix things, obviously they fix them correctly, but also testing is a great way to embed the skills and understand the challenges that you're trying to address, but also embed this knowledge, do the training, do the knowledge transfer then when it's in people's minds. Don't wait 6 months after they've had an audit and fixed things to start training them then, because already they will have started picking up bad habits again, or they're back to their schedule, they haven't got time. Strike when the iron is hot and get as much of this information to your teams when they're actually addressing accessibility. So that's the solve phase. We've looked at the discovery and the analytics. This is the solution phase, and includes our help desk, which we're rolling out here soon, as I said, for addressing questions directly with our consultants. And finally, we go into the sort of management phase that I mentioned earlier. And this is really all about managing your accessibility program. So you want to break it down, as I said, get the right people doing the right level of work that's relevant to them. And for that, you can set up projects. As I said, these are very flexible containers. You can put any kind of analytics, including your manual tests, in here, and you can combine them in different ways. So here we have a project with a web monitoring or domain monitoring application here. And these things are much easier to set up now in this new version of ARC. So here's our configuration for a scan. So obviously ARC has a crawler, and it goes out, it crawls large websites for whatever you specify, 1,000 pages, 10,000 pages. And it then injects its accessibility rules and runs the accessibility tests and comes back with the results. But you can define how all of that runs. So you can set up what we call here seed URLs. These are starting points. For example, here we've got our ARC demo site, and it's the shop section. Okay, so we've got a landing page, which is the shop section. So we're telling our crawler to go there, start there, and then go and find 20 pages in and around that. And we can even define how they look. In other words, are they going to go in a linear way, which is across the landing pages and then down a level and across again? Or are they going to pick pages at random, for instance? And even the level or depth you can go down. And you can set patterns. So you can say, you know, if your website is set up that the URLs, if you like, identify the content or a section of the site, you can create complex patterns to match that. And that means you can break things down as you need to. Okay, so this is really a much more robust system than we had before. It really allows you to slice up your site any which way, so that if you have teams who are responsible for different sections, like one team might be responsible for search, another team might be responsible for homepage, whatever it be, you can break all of those down and put them into projects accordingly, and then assign those people to look at those parts that are their responsibility. You've got simple coverage for authorization. So if it requires a login to get into that section of the site, let's say it's the user's profile section of your website, and there's a login, you can set up test credentials, and ARC can use those credentials to log in. We have all kinds of solutions, by the way, for getting ARC into behind firewalls and so on to scan content that's secure. I won't talk about that now, but we have a lot of different robust options for that. And you set the schedule for your scan, whatever you want it to run, weekly, monthly, etc. It gives you a little preview of what that schedule will look like. And here's a new feature here is variants. So you're not limited to testing with one browser as you were before. Now you can set up different browsers. You can have Chrome and Firefox. You can have them at different viewport sizes, desktop. You can even have mobile versions of the site that you can check, and you can choose your rule engine. We will have Axe. We have Axe available in our current version of ARC. We will have Axe available very soon here too. So you can set up these different variants and look to see if those variants produce different accessibility results. So the point of all of this is, it's very easy to set up in this wizard style step by step, but it's also extraordinarily flexible and robust in terms of your scanning. So it can really set it up for whatever scanning situation you have. The same is true of our user flows. I mentioned with user flows that they're both more focused, but they're also interactive. So with a user flow, you can test, for instance, a header or a footer or a dialog box, but you can also run basic actions. So for instance, here I can run through the product filters on this e-commerce website, make certain selections in the filter to look at a particular product, and record all those steps, or just write them in here. And there's basic commands you can use, scroll, type, etc. And ARC will then go perform as the user through a headless browser, carry out those steps, and then you can choose where to analyze along the way. So let's say a step might be to open a dialog box. You then scan that dialog box for accessibility and close the accessibility dialog box again. Okay. One university have been using, customer of ours have been using this in a rather ingenious way to track the student's journey. So the student comes into the university portal, logs in, goes and checks their university email, goes on and checks their courseware and their assignments in their courseware, and so on and so on. And these are all key steps. There's a great use of a user flow because it gives them a cross section of all their various applications. That flow might actually touch on 20 or more different applications and sites, but it focuses on the user and what they're trying to do, but it also acts as a kind of canary in the coal mine. All right, if there's any major problems along any of those steps, then it's time to look deeper at that particular application or site, do a user flow of that, and perhaps do some manual testing or an audit in that section as well. So user flows can be used in lots of different ways, but you can set them up easily here. Just identify those components, and then it works in the same way. You've got authorization as well if ARC needs to log in, and you can set the schedule in the same way. Okay. And when you have those up and running and you're coming into ARC, you can keep an eye on how that is going in terms of this dashboard. And you can actually go in, and this is again is a new capability in this version of ARC. You can get a complete scan log. So you can see item by item, component by component, how did the scanning go? Did we have errors or failures? And you can look into why those occurred. So you can keep a good track of your automated testing here. And we're working obviously on increasing the level of detail in these logs as we go, but it's already on a component by component basis. So that you set all of those up, you set your scope, and then you essentially build out the roles and the users to match that scope. So be it here in the example, the executive team, the UX team, you give them the views that they need and access, levels of access depending on how you need to in the organization. You know, if you have a project for a product, for example, the product manager or testing manager, scrum manager, whatever, might have the management access to set that up and run that project, whereas team members might just have access to actually look at the reports and so on. And then you customize your dashboards so that they can see what's relevant to them and they can see their own trend lines. And it's possible then to have your teams just focusing in on key parts, and you as an accessibility manager are watching the whole and making sure that your full scope, all of your stuff is operating correctly. You're hopefully getting down to a nice, manageable level of accessibility, and you're not seeing any spikes. You're keeping it in a steady state. And that puts you in a position then to really get on top of your accessibility and ensure that it stays effective and stays good. So those are all the various parts that I wanted to show you. I'm going to turn around now and open it up for questions. Have a look in the QA panel. So how often are the courses in Tutor updated in one question? Well, actually yes, it does look like the modules are rather old here. That's because of the initial rollout here. We didn't, we updated content that already existed in the pipeline, but these are actually going to be updated on a regular basis. We've actually changed the platform to a more interactive platform for our tutor courses. And so just with our knowledge base, they're constantly getting updates. And so you'll see, monthly, bi-monthly, whatever the cadence is for a particular course, they're going to be updated on a constant basis. If there are any other questions, do please type them into the Q&A panel.
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, Charlie. I also don't see any ongoing chat, so I'm hoping that I'm seeing the chat.
Yeah, I certainly, I'm looking at the Q&A panel here and I only see one question. So here we go. Yeah, well, another question from Graham. If my website has links to documents, do those get scanned? No, we don't scan documents. However, JAWS Inspect, which is a desktop product, it's actually a version of JAWS, so it runs wherever JAWS runs. You can use JAWS Inspect to check things like Word documents, PDF documents, very good for PDF documents, etc. We do also have a PDF testing service that we offer, but we don't scan those documents. There's just too many out there of many different formats to do sort of reliable scanning, large scale scanning of them.
Any other questions before we close out? We have a few more minutes if anyone has a question. Otherwise, I just want to remind everyone, thanks for attending our webinar. If anyone's interested in accessibility training or learning more about ARC, getting a personal demo or Q&A session with one of our account managers, kiosk accessibility, I can set that up with our team. Just visit our website or email IDA, @tpgi.com. Oh, I see one question that just popped in. Charlie.
How can I access the lessons? So those tutor lessons are all available inside of the platform. So if you're a user on the platform, regardless whether you're admin or a regular team member, you can access those lessons at any time. And if you want to include them in your own learning management system, we can provide them to you. And another question from Graham, does Tutor have info on document accessibility? I believe we do in there. We do have content on document accessibility, including, I think we have a section, may not be in this, yes, PDF remediation. So yes, we do. We have content on Word and other types of accessibility as well in the training.
Does Tutor have info on document accessibility? Yeah, that was the last question.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we can give everybody 5 minutes back of time if there aren't any additional questions. I don't see anything popping in, Charlie, so
Okay.
great.
Very good.
You drop as you want. I'll stay on just for one more minute in case something pops up, but everybody can go, and thanks again for attending our
Okay.
webinar. Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you all. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.